to around the video updates. And then we have Roger on as well. Would love to go into a demo of image to text. And so on the next slide, I just want to remind everyone of we do have 4 different mechanisms for individuals to engage for office hours. We have this instance every week. That's for US and EMEA, and that's just for all questions Semantic Kernel. If you're working on a solution, if you need help diving in, this is really open to any questions and any topics as well. And then once a month on the second Wednesday from 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific time, we have dedicated office hours for APAC. And so if you do have any friends or colleagues who are in that region, that's a great time for them to be able to join, and likewise to just ask any questions and dive into that. And then the 2 on the bottom that I want to highlight is around Python. We have development office hours. It's really around some of the development work we're doing. With it being open source, we love to be able to have other individuals come and collaborate and be able to work on certain items. And so we'll really be diving into the development during that office hours, which is every other Wednesday from 9 to 9:30 Pacific time. And then likewise for Java, we have a similar office hours and time for development work to be able to dive into items people may be working on for helping with development. And that's then the alternating Wednesday, every other Wednesday at that same time from 9 to 9:30 Pacific time. And so just wanted to let you know about each of the different office hours and mechanisms we have for that as well. We'll be making some other updates to how we want to collaborate with you externally that we'll be announcing shortly and letting you know as well. And I just want to remind everyone for the video piece, we're in the final discussions to be able to migrate our video recordings for office hours and others to a potential YouTube channel. And so apologies, I know it's been the last 2 weeks we haven't had the office hours location for recordings just due to the size of it, but we'll have an update on that shortly. So stay tuned and really appreciate everyone's patience with that as well. And then I do see a question in chat if there's a plan for C# development office hours. Not at this time. Any of the C# questions you would have would be great to bring to our office hours that we have for more general questions, but there isn't a plan for that right now. And then I'm not seeing any other questions in chat. If anyone does have questions, feel free to come off mute. But if not, I'd go ahead and turn it over to Roger. We'd love to dive into a quick demo from image to text and then get into open questions from there.
All right.
Just checking. Roger, are you on?
Yeah, I'm him.
Okay,
can you hear me?
perfect. Yeah, we
Okay,
can hear you.
yeah. Let me just set up really quick here. One small test here. Okay,
Perfect. And as Roger's getting set up in the chat, I also put a reference link to the blog that went out recently. And so if you want to be able to follow along for each of the steps and understand more, I've also linked to that as well.
Just a second. Yeah. Okay, let me share my screen now. All right. Make this really quick. So the latest update on our modalities is the image to text modality, and we added to the semantic kernel the main branch an easy example on how to use this modality. All right, so we have this project inside of samples, Hugging Face image text example, in which we apply a really quick and easy way to how to use our service, our new capabilities. And in the most important part of this demo is how we kind of instantiate the kernel here. And we create the kernel. We use the new add Hugging Face image to text service. We just need to specify the model in which is similar to what we have here in Hugging Face. So let me just close this one here. So here you can see that we are in the image to text. We are using the Salesforce split image captioning base. So actually any type of model, image to text model from Hugging Face works. So you can see it's just a matter of changing the model here, and you'll be using another specific one. And once you do this, you can grab the service back from the kernel and use it individually. So I put this service as one of the properties of the form. And after that, what happens here is once you click in any image, I get that image information, I get the binary of the image, and I send to the service the image content and just wait for the text, the script describing what is the image details. So when I run this program, actually, I can stop it and run again, just to give an example. I will run this program again. What it does is at the beginning, it will ask for a folder where you have in your local environment. You just need to specify a specific folder that has images, valid image types. So it is asking for a folder. Currently, it's already putting the folder that I have some images here. So inside of temp demo, I have some image there. So yeah, if I go to demo here, I have those 4 images. So as soon as I select this folder, the application runs, specifying the DO. And what it does is as soon as I click in this image, it grabs the binary data, sent to the Hugging Face, and waits for the result. So this is the cat sitting in the middle of a garden. If I send this request to the Salesforce, actually this is the planet, a picture of a planet. So if I do the same here, a large planet with bright blue and purple nebula. So this is one of the simplest examples that you can use with the latest modality. This is just a very simple example, but you can use this in your service. And the most important part in the code are kind of very straightforward, how you actually consume the service. We also not only have this demo, but we have examples that are even more easier to understand. Let me bring one of those examples here really quick in the image to text. So we can see here, this is a quick example also using the same model from Hugging Face. We are using a test image JPEG here inside of the resources. So test image will be this. Let's see. Yeah, so this is a cat. And when we run this demo, it will give us back what is the description for that. In this case, the cat itself. So it's easier to see. It's not application itself, but it's very straightforward how you can kind of leverage this new modality from Semantic Kernel. Yeah, I think that's pretty much what I had to present in this modality. We are introducing new modalities coming for Semantic Kernel, but this one is our latest one. If you have any questions, please jump in. Thanks.
Thank you, Roger. I'm super excited about this feature because I know at Microsoft accessibility is really, really important, and always getting alt text for images can be challenging. And so this can be a really easy way for generating those alt text for your users for accessibility reasons. And then in some cases, this is the only way to do it, right? As we have models generate images for us on the fly, it'll be important to always automatically create a text description for it for those users.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not only related to images, it can be used for screenshots, for any type of kind of image content, basically. Yeah, it's really, really exciting feature. Thanks.
Sorry, I have a question. May I?
Go for it.
What about asking questions about images? Is it possible, for instance, given an image, asking, I don't know, if I look at the previous image with the cat, please tell me if in that jungle there are, I don't know, bananas or ananas somewhere in the jungle. I mean, and having a response about the image that you give to as input. I don't know if it's clear, the question.
Yeah, I understood the question. I think this capability is enabled in the chat models, chat completion, where you provide in the chat the items. So you provide an item with text and an item with an image, so you can correlate your text with the image. This modality is more to get the description, to get what is the description of an image. If you want to pass multi-contents, probably you'll be looking for a chat completion. But yeah, that's a good question. So how we could eventually pass more data, not only an image. Thanks for that.
Okay, thanks.
And I think I'm looking at Hugging Face right now. Probably in the future, there appears to be image text to text and visual question answering models on Hugging Face. In the future, we may support interfaces for those to support that specific scenario outside of the chat completion as well.
Great. And then I'm seeing two questions in chat. Carlos, I saw you just raised your hand. Do you want to go first? And then Steve, we can dive into your question.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Hello, everyone. I'm working on an implementation right now, Roger, where I'm using GPT-4 for both OCR and to get metadata capture. So that was actually, it's worked very well. And I was wondering, have you tried GPT-4 with vision for the purposes that you've demoed today? And if you have, do you see any differences between what GPT-4 might offer versus what you've done?
Yeah, answering really quick the question, I didn't try with vision. I can put this in my backlog and give you a feedback on this one. But yeah, probably the interfaces will be a little bit different. So we'll have to get the image and the text at the same time and get back and read what is the chat message that will come back. But
that would be awesome, Roger. And just for the record, for those listening in right now, the implementation I do in the prompt for the Vision OCR, I also ask for metadata like, what is this image about? Give me the primary theme of the image, or whatever kind of question you might want to get. Comes back, of course, in JSON, and it's been really useful. The POC has been going very strong. So I would just point folks that direction as well to maybe consider GPT-4. Thank you, everyone.
The big differences I would say is similar to how like Microsoft's created like small language models that cost less, maybe they're more specialized. That'd be maybe one reason why you would use a specialized model that just does image to text. It may not be as good as GPT-4. Like someone will have to do these evals, but I would imagine it's a much smaller model, so it's probably cheaper. Roger's demo, we saw how fast that was, so it might also be faster. So there's always kind of like trade-offs on, hey, do you use this like gigantic model that knows everything about the world, or do you use these small models that are focused on a particular scenario? And depending on what your needs are, like if it's just alt text for images, I would imagine what Roger showed would be perfect. But if you need to do more advanced like questioning, answering on the images, or getting more rich in-depth analysis of what's in the image, something like GPT-4 may make more sense.
Thank you.
So people, are there other questions?
There was one other one from Steve. Steve, do you want to come off of mute to elaborate? I'm happy to go through it if not.
Yeah, sure. Hey, guys. So I've got a kind of unique use case where I work for a building engineering company, and we're looking at PDFs that are blueprints of buildings, right? So most of the vision and AI and vision area and CV models kind of are more geared towards like cats and dogs and stuff like that, right? But we're trying to identify different pieces of a building, and it seems to be pretty complicated from some of the test cases that I've had. So what I've done to date is just parse the data that's off those blueprint plans. You can ask questions and the users are getting somewhat useful information. Now we're trying to go to a multimodality kind of perspective where I have the parse data, but I also want to do another search of I'm about to upload to GPT Vision to try that as a first model. But my question was, is that going to be fully supported where I can do in parallel a chat completion for like just text, and then also do in parallel GPT like for vision call, because the challenge is going to be I'm going to have to run. I'm doing a Azure AI search. I'm going to get back like top 3 results for which blueprint documents match, and then I need to run in parallel and get answers from multiple pages, and then provide that in the route pattern into another AI to make the decision on which one is giving back the best answer. Because multiple sheets of a blueprint can answer a user's question in different ways, and that's all important to decipher for the end user. So I need to I want to run them in parallel, I guess is my main thing. I'm not sure if that's feasible.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if you're using Python or C#.
C#.
Yeah. I guess I would imagine you'd create your different threads, you'd run them in parallel, you'd wait for the task to end, and then you could take that information and lump them up into a single prompt and give it to the AI. At least that would be the process I'd use. I see Roger nodding his head.
Yeah, basically the way that we implement in Semantic Kernel is to the kernel itself to be very lightweight. So you could have different kernels in different threads running and making queries at the same time, and put all of them in a task await or task when all of them are working.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm sorry. I understand how to do parallelization and threading. That's
exactly.
no problem. I'm talking about like multiple parallel LLM calls from the same kernel, doing multiple modalities. So can I do a chat completion to GPT-4 vision as well as text completion at the same time? Okay, you can. Okay.
Yeah, the limiting factor would probably be the services themselves. So depending on like what your quota is, you might get throttled or something. But on the semantic kernel side, there aren't any limitations of parallelization because the kernel itself is fairly stateless.
Yeah, it's a invoke async is a task, so you can kind of have many invoke asyncs at the same time and make the calls using specific models for your selector, so you can specify that.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then
thank you.
I know in your question you also asked like, is there models for like PDF to text? So in Microsoft, we don't have integration with this yet with semantic kernel, but it's probably worth playing around with. It's Azure AI Document Intelligence. So they have some like predefined models to like grab information from like tables and some other content. I believe you can also build custom models. So you mentioned blueprints, so you might have to create like a custom model to extract information from blueprints. But you would be able to do that as part of Azure services.
Okay, great. I'll look into that. Thank you.
And I dropped a link in the chat.
Great, thanks.
Sophia, were there any other questions?
I've seen a couple others come through. Roger, thank you so much for the demo. There's one around, is there a connector for AI document intelligence on the SK roadmap?
We've talked about it internally. We don't have anything concrete planned right now. We're trying to get support for some of the other top LLMs that are out there. And then we'll start diving into some of the more multimodal things, including document intelligence.
Perfect. I'm just looking through to see. Tom, you were mentioning that you're having an issue. Do you want to come off mute and elaborate a bit more?
Yeah, sure. So this has already been raised in GitHub. I'm kind of looking for an update on it if that's something that you might have. I'm building a chat application using auto function calling and streaming responses, and it works for the first kind of back and forth. But after that, we're getting an error, 400 error, where it's saying that the ordering of the message, something to do with the tool call property, is missing. This is using the Azure OpenAI API. So it means that our conversation can't really progress after it's done the first tool call, responded to it, and we can't really continue. I'm not sure if you've got any view on how long it would take to, or what the issue is there.
I'm just taking a look at the issue right now. Let's see.
Thanks.
And I don't know if Mark's on the call. It looks like he self-assigned it to himself. Yes. So we are currently working on making our filters and our hooks non-experimental within semantic kernel. For those of you that aren't familiar, It's basically a way of you injecting custom logic as part of our process of running a prompt, sending it to the LLM, getting results back, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As part of that work, one of the pieces that we want to be able to do is allow developers like yourself to customize the cancellation reasons and message and the error reasons and message. So that should land in the next, like, I don't know, a week or two.
Okay.
Once that's available, you would then have control through hooks to be able to customize the error message so that it could provide, in your case, the additional context, or you
Yeah.
could make it something completely custom if you'd like. So that is in works right now. I just ask, have some patience as we get that
Yeah, no,
fully
that's
wrapped
fine.
up and pushed up.
Okay, thank you very much.
And I guess before we dive into more general questions, just like a few other updates. Sophia had some other blog posts where we are highlighting some of our, let me go and check my screen, some customer stories. So if you want to see how other folks are using Semantic Kernel, I'd highly recommend the one on Accenture and Visma. And then this has probably been the most asked for sample for Semantic Kernel, like how do you actually use it with dependency injection? I think on previous office hours, we've kind of showed this particular sample while it was in PR. It is now officially baked into Semantic Kernel. There's a really great blog post walking through the key pieces around it. So if y'all have had questions on what is the best way of using dependency injection, what are the patterns, I highly recommend reading the blog and checking out the code. All right, so I will, that's it from the Semantic Kernel updates. Sophia, I'll let you kind of drive through those next.
Yeah, I'm seeing a number of hands raised. If we want to start with the first kind of work I read down, I may be mispronouncing this name. Is it Say?
Yeah, almost there. It's Sai. Yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you. If you want to dive into your question, we'd love to be able to dive in.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So this is more of a use case, right? So what we're trying to build is a internal platform for the organization. So it's more of a ChatGPT kind of environment, and we're trying to build a catalog kind of stuff for the plugins. So the teams can submit their own plugin, which will get into this internal platform, right? So that's the kind of idea. So now, is there any things that, from a semantic kernel perspective, if you can suggest or point me to the best way for the end teams, the development teams or the business teams, to submit their plugins, which can be dynamically loaded within the internal platform that we are building? I can repeat the question if it's not clear, but that's just wanted to hear your thoughts about it.
Yeah, so what we've seen, folks, when you have a distributed model where a bunch of different people are building plugins, is probably the best way of actually building those plugins as kind of like microservices or using something like Azure Functions. So, I'm putting in the chat one of our samples of showing how to create a ChatGPT style plugin that really is just a RESTful API that someone can add to a kernel using an open API specification. So I checked that out. As you do build your internal plugin, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. No, definitely. That's one aspect of it, like a service, right? But what we're kind of looking at is more from a contributors, right? So to the internal community, internal platform, we are looking at contributors. So basically, it could be a prompt and or a function calling. People build their own plugins and deploy it, right? So that's a kind of a process that we're looking at. And yeah, so I was kind of envisioning something like a app registration portal where people can build their own, test it out in a sandbox, and publish it as a plugin. Then we kind of bring it and load it. So that's a kind of a thought process. Definitely, I'll take a look at the service thinking. But the other way is something which right now we're kind of working on.
Yeah. So yeah, it makes sense. Like, hey, you build an app that folks can either create new prompts, have a playground to test it, or load in one of these services as an API, again, being able to verify and test it in a playground with the LLM. And I think that was going to be my next key piece. One of the challenges, this goes for everyone, as you distribute out the creation of plugins or tools or prompts for LLMs throughout your company. It's really important to have evaluations, tests, to ensure that when these new prompts, these new plugins enter the rest of the system, that they don't have negative consequences for the other plugins and prompts that you already have. The most common example is if you have an LLM and it's used to using, let's say, a CRM plugin, and then the next day someone introduces a internal plugin to search the employee's contact information. You can imagine that those two plugins might be very similar. They might say, hey, use this function to search for people, right? And so they might have conflicts. They might override each other. They might confuse the LLM. And so coming up with processes, not to just test a single plugin, but also testing how plugins interact with other plugins through a automated fashion will be very important as you kind of build out these distributed systems for contributing things like prompts and tools.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all. Yeah, we still have, I don't have a solutions or things on it. It's in the cards, but what do you think? Any suggestions on that area? Again, there's no concrete thing. People might have to choose a limited number of plugins, like how it's in ChatGPT today. Or is there any other suggestions do you have? I understand the problem, but if there is any solutions towards it.
Yeah, there's many different kind of ways you can proceed. What we've seen some people do as we kind of go into this multi-agent world is when you craft an agent, you manually define, hey, for my customer support agent, I'm only going to give it the CRM plugin, maybe the purchasing plugin, maybe some other plugin to help with customers. And I'm not going to have the internal employee plugin. So that's one way of doing it. The other is just making sure that these prompts don't or the descriptions of these plugins don't kind of interact in a negative way. So just having a bunch of different evaluations. And then you also mentioned a good one, giving the control to the user, allowing them to pick which plugins to use. So yeah, all of these different scenarios or solutions make sense. It really depends on how you expect these elements to be used by your end users. All right, hopefully that helps.
Sure.
Yeah, Sophia,
definitely.
Perfect. I'm going to go through our next raised hand. Apologies if I mispronounced your name. Rigoberto?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, so I'm really just asking if there's any examples using Blazor to just create a basic GPT clone using Azure OpenAI. So I work at a large company. They're going all in on Gen AI. I just joined the team. I'm learning Semantic Kernel from scratch. But in the short amount of time I've been studying it, I've covered a lot of material. But I'm being given a lot of time to learn, which is great, but I don't really have a whole lot of front-end skills. So I started learning Blazor. I found an example using .NET 7, the Blazor server, the old template, that kind of has that back and forth functionality. And I worked on that and tried to transfer it over to the new Blazor app template, but it didn't quite work. So I'm just looking for a very vanilla back and forth GPT clone so that I can then add Semantic Kernel and actually have something to show if I come up with something good. Anyone have any ideas?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with anything. I know we have Roger on the call. Are you familiar with anything?
The first thing that came to my head regarding a Blazor good example could be the eShop that have for .NET. I believe they have even an implementation using Semantic Kernel on the shopping cart. Might be a good thing to take a look on that one. That would be my take for Blazor, looking how to use. But yeah, Blazor, if you go for the main website just to get a glimpse on how to use it, Semantic Kernel would be running in the backend, would be pretty straightforward using our examples in the backend code. So I wouldn't yeah, that could be a good fit in the backend part of Blazor implementation. But yeah, I would still suggest you go to official reference for Blazor knowledge and semantic kernel when applying the backend.
Definitely. I'll take a look at what you shared. And if I figure it out, I can share that here. Because again, it's just a very basic back and forth. The example I saw in .NET 7, it actually uses Azure AI OpenAI. So it doesn't have the semantic kernel, but it does connect to Azure OpenAI. And I bet a lot of people useful just that functionality for like, you know, the bubbles for the chat, the speaker versus asker, and then the box to just ask questions. Anyway, I'll take a look. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
If you want any more guidance on that, I don't have anything to share because it's internal, but it's the same thing that I've been doing in my company, is building a fairly simple Blazor chat conversation application. I might look if we get time to take the company work we've been doing and find a way of open sourcing it as an example, but that won't be for a good couple of weeks or months.
Yeah, that would be great.
Perfect. Thanks, both of you. I'm going to go on to the next raised hand, and we'll come back to chat at the end. Matthew, do you want to go next?
Yeah. So my team's been working with a stepwise planner in Semantic Kernel, and I've run into an issue that I'm not exactly sure if this is a bug or not, but I believe it might be. So when we're calling functions with our stepwise planner, we pass in our question and our supplementary instructions, and our functions return back the appropriate data. The planner works as intended, but on the final step, when it's calling the AI model to consolidate the data, it seems to inject data from our question into our tool calls. Like say, the question asks, like, is customer X included in this data? And the data will include like customers A, B, C, D, and E from the tool call. And the final response from the planner seemingly says customer X is included. The impacted customers are A, B, C, D, E, and X. And checking in the chat history, customer X is not mentioned in any of our tool calls. The only time it's ever mentioned is within the question itself that would be passed into the planner. And it's not really, it's injected at the point in the planner code where it tries to, where it tries to get the final completion function.
Yeah, so this sounds like an issue with the model itself where it's hallucinating. Are you able to share which model are you using?
It's 3.5.
3.5. I guess just to make sure this isn't some issue with semantic kernel, I would try 4 just to see if you get the correct answer. If you do, that to me is a sign that it's an issue with 3.5 Turbo just not being intelligent enough. If that is the case, you would likely need to improve the results by customizing things like the system prompt. I know you mentioned you're using the function calling stepwise planner. If you do need that extra level of control to customize the system prompt, maybe change how the tool calls are done, I'd recommend using automatic function calling, which is what the function calling stepwise planner uses behind the scenes. That gives you a little bit more control. It also gives you streaming capabilities. But that might be your next kind of course of action. Test what you do before, see if you actually get the right answer. And then if you do, go back to 3.5 and use prompt engineering to improve the system prompt with automatic function calling.
Great. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Matthew. I see a hand raised from Julia, if you want to go next.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'm also working on a chatbot with the Stepwise Planner. Um, and I've incorporated in like a certain API that where it's important that I cite when I use that one data source. Um, and I'm having trouble with my instructions not being followed when creating the final answer. So, um, in the stepwise planner, like there will be a step where it does properly cite, like according to this data source, and then we'll say the information. But when creating the final answer, um, I've tried to add in like an extra prompt in the very beginning of the planner saying like, oh, include this information if you use it. And it really is having trouble following that in the send final answer step. So I was wondering, if there's a way to augment the prompt within the stepwise planner of when we like create that final answer based on like all the previous like messages that exist.
That is a good question. I'm just taking a look at the stepwise plan. If we have a ability to customize it. If not, I might ask you to create an issue on us so that we could add a knob like that. And if we don't, which it looks like we might not, prompt template config. It looks like there is a setting called prompt user config. I don't know if that's something that you've played around with. There's also appears to be a, let me go ahead and show my screen. There also appears to be a suffix string that can be customized as part of the stepwise planner configuration object. So you might be able to inject some additional system messages as part of these two properties to elicit the behavior that you want. Probably this one in particular is the one that you'd want to change. If that doesn't work, similar to the recommendation I gave, I believe it was Matthew earlier, you might also want to play around with just vanilla automatic function calling. Again, that might give you a little bit more control. We could give you complete control over the system prompts.
Gotcha. So this like file that you're showing here is a prompt for configuring the entire planner. And then the prompt will like trickle down to the rest of the functions you're saying?
Yeah, so okay, let's take a look real quick. So we go into Visual Studio Code. Actually, I don't think I have the easiest way of doing this. Okay, let's just see where this information is used. So if when you create the stepwise planner, you can pass it that configuration object, and it looks like, let's just figure out where this suffix is used. So it looks like when the chat history is initially created, it adds this suffix. And then my guess is systems variables, add system message. Okay, here's the system message. It's prompt template. Just here, let's see. I'm not sure where stepwise SK prompt. Let's see, stepwise. Ah, okay, we found it. So this is the out of the box system prompt that comes with the stepwise planner.
Yeah.
And so you can see there's the suffix at the bottom here. That's what gets customized. You might also, if you need even more control, there was the configuration that allows you to overwrite this entire system prompt. And so that might allow you to reinforce even more, hey, as part of the final step, as part of the final answer, it must have the citation, right? So you might change this one line right here. Once I have gathered all the necessary observations, through thoughts and actions, I will provide the final answer with a citation. And I believe that may also help elicit the right response for the model.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, thank you.
And just to reinforce, the way you would customize that prompt is there's this prompt user config that you can override as part of the configuration object.
Okay, thank you.
Good luck.
And then just looking through, I'm seeing a couple of related questions from Zhang. Do you want to come off of mute to elaborate?
Sure, thank you. So this is following Matthew's question because we work on the same project. And you mentioned about the auto function calling directly from OpenAI, which I have seen a little bit, but I might not know like all the latest gets a bit about that. So like to ask a further question. So if we're going to use the auto function calling to solve our problem, which means we switching from using the function stepwiser planner. So from my understanding, the auto function calling is that, I mean, like you have the prompt, you have the plugin, and then it will call the proper function needed for you to implement the prompt. But the stepwise planner does have the advantage, the benefit about like creating a plan, which means like a couple of steps that will need to eventually fulfill the request, which means like several rounds of function calling, from my understand, right? I mean, like if we're not using that, but use the option auto function calling directly, does that mean we need to manually take care of the steps of create this plan and somehow run each of the steps through auto function calling? And also when the result coming back, we need to somehow evaluate if the result is good or it is terminal. Do we need extra steps to call more functions to do something? So that's my question.
Yeah. So you're totally right. So I often get a question like, what is the difference between function calling stepwise planner and just vanilla function calling? The
Right.
only difference is that right at the very beginning, we asked the LM, hey, before you get started, describe all the steps that you need. In a handful of scenarios, and this is probably a minority of scenarios, we found that it does help for the AI to like take a step back and just like a human could figure out like what am I going to do, try to do next, right? And that
Right.
can sometimes improve the behavior of calling the functions. What you're asking though is, hey, if given if I do use auto function calling, am I going to have to like manually call every single step? Do I have to create a plan? And the answer to that is no, actually. So if I go ahead and share my screen, I have my very basic light sample. Here we can see we create our kernel with our history, and we are setting the thing to auto invoke. And what will happen is if I ask the AI to toggle the light, and we look at the debug console, it's currently empty. What's going to happen is the AI is smart enough in this case to call multiple functions. So first, it doesn't know if the light is on or off. It just knows it needs to toggle it. And so the first function that it calls is the get state method, right? And so it learns that the light is currently off. And then it's smart enough through automatic function calling, oh, I'm not done yet. I'm still not done with the user's request. I'm now going to call the change state function and set that state to true, right? And so here we can say it's now true. It's the light is now on, and then it can print back to the user. So in my simple lines of code, I didn't have to like write some for loop that force the AI to go step by step. It's smart enough through automatic function calling to do that loop itself, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah, so essentially, I mean, like we pretty much can in the system prompt send over to auto function calling, saying like you need to go ahead and use plugin functions to collect some information, and after after you got all the results, put them together and use a write-up function to give us a response, something like that, right? And then you will take care of that.
Yep.
Okay.
And then I think, I don't know, I've never tried this before. Before calling any tools, first list out all of the steps that you need to take to satisfy the user's request. Okay, so if we run this, theoretically, this might actually kind of replicate some of the same behaviors of the stepwise planner. So if we say toggle the light, let's see.
Yeah, sounds like it pretty much can do what the stepwise planner do, right? In one function call, in like one bump. Or it would just like take care of all the steps behind its thing, I guess.
Yeah, it looks like the user is having to like come in and say do something. But yeah, you can see how it first tried to create the steps. Went back to the user, I said go, and then it completed the steps. So yeah.
So you will, I mean, the user go thing, is that a manual thing? Like, I mean,
yeah, that was manual. And let's see, satisfy and then
can you say just like go run it in silent mode, just list the steps, but don't ask user for confirmation. Instead, just go ahead and execute the steps that you. Okay.
Try that now. You don't need to ask for user approval. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
AI is thinking. Okay. So we might have to play with prompt engineering now. It's just going ahead and running the steps. But there, I feel like there's some magical words that you could have do. Okay. But yeah, hopefully that answered your question and kind of give you a sense of how auto function calling works.
And a side note, I mean, like to use the feature displayed here by the auto function calling, what kind of model is required?
So the most important thing is you just need to use a model that is newer than, I think, June. So the 06 models from last year introduced auto function calling. The models introduced in November can do parallel function calling. And I found that 3.5 turbo is sufficient in most cases, unless you have like complex logic, and then you might need to use GTB4.
Okay, got it.
All right, Sophia, who's next?
Perfect. I see a hand raised. Do you want to come off of mute?
So this is a follow-up question on John's question. So I posted a snippet of the execution settings. We do have this to-call behavior dot auto invoke kernel function for the to-call behavior property. Do you have any recommendation what should be the appropriate value for all the other properties that you see on the snippet? Like how it would impact the performance and the quality of the kernel.
Trying to open up the snippet so I can see what it's actually saying. Oh, so you're asking what these different properties kind of do. In terms of performance, I don't think any of these are going to change like the speed of it, or at least it shouldn't. This is coming from memory. You probably have more luck reading the OpenAI docs on exactly what these things do. But presence penalty, actually, I don't know what that one does. Seed is basically kind of like a seed for a random number generator. So if you add a number there, it will always return the same results if it gets the same input. I would recommend this for testing, but not for production. Frequency penalty, it'll try to avoid the same word over and over again. And then temperature and top P, the docs recommend that you only use one at a time. Both of them kind of dictate how random or creative, depending on how you want to think about it, the model is. And so for depending on your scenarios, if it's an enterprise scenario, I would recommend a very high top P or a very low temperature, since you likely don't need a creative AI in enterprise scenarios.
So between the two properties, which one controls the limit, I guess, the creativity and assure the consistency better to your experience?
That I don't know. I haven't done enough tests. I'm sure there's research papers on this that you might be able to find. My understanding is the way they work is temperature kind of changes the randomness of the numbers inside of the system and gives it more range. So that's how that function works. Top P, basically what happens is once all the random calculations have happened, the AI then picks the top kind of tokens that could be next that it could return back to the user. By changing the top P, you limit the scope of the tokens that it will use for the user. I believe that's how it works. I could be completely wrong. Someone with actual AI and machine learning knowledge can come off mute and say, Matthew, you got it completely wrong. But that's my general understanding.
Yeah, it's good.
Cool.
Perfect. I'm just seeing in chat, Colton, you had a good question around header arguments. Do you want to come off of mute?
Yeah, no problem. So I've basically got a workflow going where I'm just trying to do a basic chat implementation that can use an open API plugin. And the problem I'm having is I can get it to work two different ways that are kind of the opposites. One is if I explicitly state the query parameters and the header arguments, and then I just straight up invoke the plugin. The other is if the chatbot basically infers the query parameters from the Open API schema, from like the YAML file, but then it has no way to know the API key explicitly. So in chat, I would literally just have to say, this is the API key. Basically, is there anything baked into Semantic Kernel already to handle this, or would I need to write something myself?
And you're using Python SDK. I believe this has been fixed in the .NET version. Right now, Evan Matson, who's our main Python dev, is actually porting over all of the Open API logic in .NET into Python. So I believe this should be fixed over the next like 2 or 3 weeks. In the meantime, you may have to write something custom or just provide a very simple native function wrapper on top of it. The other thing that I would say we're very early on noodling is there are several scenarios where you need some parameter for a function, but you don't want to have the AI provide it, like all the current users' details, or I don't know, a very large JSON object, right? And so we are trying to figure out, like, are there ways of like secretly telling a function additional information? I think an API key would be another great example of that. We haven't finalized on an architecture yet, but if anyone in the community has any kind of feedback in that regard, if you want to start a discussion and share some of your thoughts, we'd love to hear them. But I think, Matthew, for your immediate needs, we are just now picking up that work and should be available in a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. And in the meantime, using native functions as wrappers may be the best way to go.
Awesome. Thank you.
And then I'm seeing a question in chat from Steve. Is there any update from Microsoft Teams team on their platform supporting native text streaming in messages? Yeah.
So we are unfortunately not from the Teams team, so I don't know what their roadmap looks like. I know internally when we've wanted to simulate that experience, there are APIs to actually update the message. And so basically you can send a bunch of update requests and it progressively gets bigger. It's a hack. It doesn't work very well, and it blows through your consumption of your API usage. But if it's for a demo that you want to show how it could look or work, that is an option.
That's what I'm doing now, Matt. Actually in production, company-wide in our chatbot. So it works. It's less than ideal, right? It's not as smooth, but it does work. I just ask that every week to see if anybody has any updates, but I guess I'll probably just submit a ticket to the Teams team. Thanks.
I know someone somewhere has to be caring about it because, again, I don't have insider knowledge on this because I don't work on these projects. But my guess is that our Microsoft Copilots also probably have to do the same thing. And so I would imagine there are teams in Microsoft that are yelling very loudly at the teams to get that fixed. But yeah, that's all conjecture on my point.
Perfect. Nice to have a hand raised. Luca, do you want to come off of mute?
Yeah, I have two questions. I think that one is very quick. I would like to use function calling, but the problem at the moment is that I would like to skip the last call to OpenAI because I have a problem similar to the one from Julia. But I've seen that you are working on filters. That I think is the solution for this. Just to know if do you have already a release date for this feature in particular for the Python SDK?
For the so with the Python SDK is finally like catching up with .NET. So we're actually developing the we call them filters in .NET. We're going to be calling them hooks in Python. We're actually developing those in parallel. So I'd expect both of those to land around the same time. What you're specifically asking for are hooks for automatic function calling. That's probably like another couple weeks out before it lands in either library.
Okay. Great. And then last question. Imagine that I have an API that basically use Semantic Kernel to call OpenAI. And in my implementation, I have the kernel and the service that are singleton. Instead, for instance, I've seen that in the article that you showed also before, showing how to use dependency injection in .NET solution, they create the kernel as a transient object. I don't know if you have any, in general, any guideline if creating object and keeping those as singleton rather than creating every time the kernel, the service. I don't know. In general, what kind of guideline do you have to handle these objects?
Yeah, well, in most cases, like you prefer a singleton, you create it once, and you never have to spend time or compute recreating it again. So for expensive things like functions or plugins or services, like make them singletons. They should be stateless. That should be fine. The one reason why we recommend making the kernel transient is the plugins are mutable, or the plugins collection. Okay. And so it is possible for some part of your application to add or remove or change one of the plugins, which might have downstream impact. And because the kernel is pretty, I think Roger mentioned, it's very lightweight. It's just a pointer to all these different services. It's very cheap to spin up. So it gives you some peace of mind if it's transient. You're not going to have any issues. If you can guarantee that the plugin collection will never mutate, then you can also make that a singleton.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
And we are at time. Sophia, maybe we take one more question, and then we'll have to wrap up office hours.
Yeah, absolutely. Jose, I saw you had a couple of questions in chat. Is there one in particular that you want to bubble up?
Hey, Sophia. Yeah, well, it's been a while and the chat is crowded, so let me recap. I think one was about the logo, so it would be great to have it in vectorized form. So, I mean, vectorized, you can use it for engraving, you can use it for t-shirts, so that would be great. And the other thing is about the hooks. We will have them on agents, or these will come after all the great work that you team are doing on the agent stack.
I would be shocked. I would be shocked if we didn't have some sort of filters or hooks on agents. We are modeling a lot of our patterns off of what AutoGen does, and they do have pre and post hooks as agents talk to each other. So that is on the roadmap. But as you mentioned, Jose, like it'll probably come after we finalize the abstractions around agents. So I wouldn't expect it would come with the assistance API implementation, but what's coming next.
Mm-hmm. Lovely. Thank you.
Great. I'm seeing one final I saw a hand raised that I just want to end with. Is there a feature to help us reset the plugin for the Python SDK?
Reset the plugins. You mind, June?
Yeah. So it's actually from the previous question about the kernels, I actually just kind of recreate the kernel, like we were talking about, just because I need to like remove the plugins and then give it like a new set of plugins to work with for the next whatever set of tasks. So right now, I literally just go to kernel plugins and just like reset that whole plugins. I just delete all the plugins that already registered kernel and just add in like plugins over again. So I was wondering if there's like a convenience function to just remove all the plugins that are registered to the kernel.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't think that is available today. If you don't mind creating an issue on us, that we can add to our backlog. And then because we don't have time right now to dive into it, if you don't mind also adding into the issue kind of your scenarios, then we can figure out the best way of supporting.
Got it. You mean create a VSO worker? I'm not sure like how you guys manage all these.
Yeah. So real quick for everyone, because Semantic Kernel is a public open source project, everything is in GitHub for the world to see. So if you do run into any challenges with using Semantic Kernel, or you want to see a new issue, a feature added, you can just come to issues and create a new issue on us. We typically triage these either once a day or once every other day. And while I'm sharing the screen, you can always see what our team is working on by going to our public project. And you can see all the different issues that we are working on.
Got it. Thanks.
Well, thanks, y'all. We'll go ahead and wrap up here.